Hi, this is Brad.
And Bryan Manning, and you are listening to
White Canes Connect.
Hey there, PA Federationists. Welcome to another episode of White Canes Connect, presented by the National Federation of the Blind of Pennsylvania. My name is David Goldstein. I am the treasurer of the Keystone chapter. Joining me today is co-host Simon Bonenfant, the president of the Pennsylvania Association of Blind Students. Simon, how are you today?
I'm doing great, David. It's great to be with you. And it was even greater to speak with our guests today, Bryan and Brad Manning from Two Blind Brothers. They're doing a lot of great work. They got a lot of different clothing options, and they're doing some great work with the community, a lot of different partnerships with organizations and individuals. And I was very impressed with how easy it was to talk to them. You know, they're a very big business, but they also have a lot of humility. And that humility has really got them far to where they are today and where they're going in the future. I think you'll agree this was a great interview. So without further ado, sit back, relax, and enjoy our chat with Two Blind Brothers.
Brad and Bryan, thanks so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you. We're excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you both. Welcome into White Canes Connect. I'm sure all the listeners are going to enjoy all that you have to offer and your incredible story. For those who have never heard of you before, what are the Two Blind Brothers?
I'm going to go first because Brad usually steals the microphone at this point, but he's too polite to interrupt me now when I'm already on a roll. So, Two Blind Brothers, I'm Bryan Manning, and my brother is Brad Manning. We were diagnosed with Stargardt's disease, which is a juvenile form of macular degeneration. Basically, you lose all the vision in the center of your vision, but you keep a lot of periphery. About age 7, our vision's about 2,400 these days. And Two Blind Brothers is a clothing company we started about 7 years ago with two simple missions: to make the best fitting and feeling clothing in the world, which we succeed at endlessly, and to donate 100% of our profits back to preclinical retinal researchers working on cures for blindness.
So are you guys a 501c3 or are you just donating the profits back? How does that work?
Well, it's a good question, actually. Two Blind Brothers, the brand, is not even allowed to be a 501c3 because we quote unquote compete with normal industry, other brands, for example. So there's a law called the commercial doctrine, but the structure that helps us get around that is something called a commercial co-venture agreement, which is basically Two Blind Brothers entering into a profit sharing agreement where we share the profits directly to our charity partners, such as the Foundation Fighting Blindness.
As far as going back when you guys were kids, how quickly did your vision diminish and how were things going through school?
Stargardt's is kind of one of those hockey stick diseases where over the course of kind of a 10-year period, you lose a lot of vision really quickly. And Brad and I were both diagnosed at the age of 7. And, the one really interesting thing about degenerative diseases that probably a lot of your listeners know is you solve a problem, right? You can sit at the front of the classroom and you can see the chalkboard and bam, you solved it. You have to sit in the front, you have to have big textbooks, but all of a sudden the next year you go to school and sitting at the front of the classroom, you actually can't see the chalkboard anymore. So now you have to get up out of your seat and walk closer. And a lot of that, those actions draw a lot of attention. They draw a lot of focus on you. But our mom actually gave us a lot of great advice, especially in our early years, that basically said, hey, everybody has their challenges. Everybody has their difficulties. Some kids are tall, some kids are short, some kids are heavy, some kids are skinny, some have big ears, some have big heads, some smell bad. You're fortunate because you know what your challenge is. You can't see well. And I don't know if we took it to heart fully at that time, but it was kind of that message that kept us going out and trying and to move through school, even with the degeneration of our vision.
So you said you were both diagnosed at 7. Are you guys twins?
No, I'm 5 years older than Bryan and maybe a little wiser.
Just a hair.
We'll let the listeners decide that. So what were the things like for you going to school as your vision loss progressed? And how was that for you as you were growing up, being kids and teenagers and all that? It sounds like that your parents had great mindsets for you to be set up for success, which carried over into you. But I'm sure there was some challenges that you had to overcome.
One of the great themes of growing up is getting comfortable with who you are. And I think that's particularly tough for anyone who's been diagnosed with a particular disease or condition that makes them a little bit different in certain ways. And so, we certainly went through a very kind of predictable path of struggles. Did we ever get teased about our eyesight? Sure. Did we ever have those moments where we wanted to be able to see something that we couldn't and we were shy about getting help to see it? Did we navigate those circumstances where, we were nervous to tell people about what we could or couldn't see? And we have a lot of examples of that, and then obviously like confronting the fact that we would not be able to get our driver's license, or would get it but wouldn't be able to retain it for very long. I think the important thing that we've realized about that particular journey is, as long as you don't lose the spirit to lean into those tough moments, you're going to come out a stronger, more resilient person. And there's actually a lot of great wisdom, experience, lessons learned that you'll benefit from for the rest of your life if you keep that attitude.
You both went to the University of Virginia. Brad, I'm guessing you chose it, and then Bryan, you said, "Oh, that looks like a nice place." You visited maybe a few times and thought this is a good place for you to go. Did you have any say, Bryan, when Brad was looking at schools, that, hey, this looks good, let's go here, I'll go there after you get done, and we'll both be Cavaliers for the rest of our lives? How did that all play out when you were looking around for schools?
I think when I was about 16, Brad took me to a party at UVA, and I said, "This is good. I'm ready. This works for me. Sign me up for whatever this is." And then he's like, "Well, Bryan, you have to get good grades to do this." And I was like, "All right, fine. I'll start studying. I guess that makes sense." No, and it's funny, when we were looking around at schools, UVA, we're kind of from Virginia, so it made a lot of sense. It's an amazing school. And one thing we kind of took to note, and this is more steering by a little bit of our parents, but larger state schools have a lot of benefit, both academically and socially, but they also, from like a learning needs center perspective, they have a lot of ability to help and be on top of and be regulated by that, so you can find all of the assistance and need and whatever you might from them, which is always a wonderful thing. And it was an unbelievable experience.
I know that Virginia lately is so tough to get into, I guess, for out-of-state kids. I know a few kids who SAT scores in the mid to upper 1500s couldn't get in this year, and I was just shocked at it. So I'm guessing it's a little bit easier if you're from Virginia. You guys know at this point, I guess it's been a while.
Thank God.
Thank you.
Did you both study business when you were there?
I studied finance and then and marketing, and Bryan studied statistics with a concentration in econometrics.
Wow.
That wow made 2 years of just struggling through something totally worth it. That's the magic of why we got that degree.
Well, I have a lot of respect for you. I'm sure, David, you say the same thing. Wow, that's great. So at that point, did you know that you were going to start this business, or did you have an inkling or an idea of this business? And if you did or didn't, take us through, when was the first inkling that one of you had the idea or both of you had the idea Talk about that.
I graduated in 2007. Bryan graduated in 2013. We had some various different jobs, and I went to a grad school program. And in 2015, we were walking around and shopping in New York City. And I was working for an investment firm. Bryan was working for a data sales company. And, we walked into this Bloomingdale's store. And if you don't have the best eyesight in the world, you lose each other everywhere you go. And usually I can find Bryan by his, let's just call it a visually impaired friendly head. But funny enough, we were shopping and, seeing the tags, the labels, the sizes, all that stuff can be a pain. So the way we would always shop is by kind of getting to this section, feeling around for, if we like the sort of feel and quality of an item, and then getting help or doing the extra work to figure out if it's the right size, price, etc. And coincidentally, after losing each other in the store, we walk out a half an hour later and we coincidentally bought the same exact shirt. And so we played rock, paper, scissors because one of us, we weren't going to buy the same exact shirt. I won. Bryan had to return the shirt. And but something kind of struck us in the moment. That was like, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's something to fabrics and sense of touch and the way people shop for clothing. It's kind of a nice idea for, maybe a clothing brand. But what we were really inspired by was, the Foundation Fighting Blindness is an organization we had been very close to our whole life. And, one of the things that they always struggle with is how do you make research feel tangible? And we thought, well, what if we combine these two things? What if we start a little side project with the two missions that Bryan mentioned at the beginning, make the softest clothing that we possibly could and help the Foundation Fighting Blindness by donating all the money. And so that's where the original idea came from.
And how long did it take you from that day to actually getting up and running?
Oh, God. The way I like to think about it is we made every mistake two people could make in making T-shirts. It was a series of disasters compounded upon one another. We were fortunate. We had some friends in New York who were in the fashion industry who could actually help us point to, cut and sew manufacturers. So our first cut and sew manufacturer was up on 37th Street, West 37th, I believe. And we basically were buying the scraps of what other people had ordered, because what Brad and I had done is we went through these fabric books in a coffee shop in the West Village once a week for probably 6 months, just saying, oh, I like this one, oh, I don't. And we would just brute force our way through it with no rhyme, no reason, no tactic, just yes, no piles. And eventually we got down to the final yes, and Brad picks it up and he has it between his fingers and he looks at me in the eye and he's all excited and he's like, Bryan, I'm pretty sure this is the one. And he goes, I got a question for you. And I think he's going to say something profound or intelligent or like, kind of retrospective and really make this a hallmark moment. And he goes, do you know how to sew by any chance? And so we spent, and then we found the place on 37th, and then we had to order, we had to steal some fabric from kind of other orders because we weren't big enough to make the few hundred shirts, to ship a container in ourselves. So it must have taken, what would you say, Brad? We probably 9 months to actually go from zero to having a shirt.
Yeah, we started that summer around July of 2015, and we launched the company May of 2016.
And did you have a brick and mortar location, or were you going to be exclusively online? How did that all play out?
Exclusively online.
I noticed that you mentioned, of course, the feel of the shirts. And for all your products, the feel is really important. And I can say that I'm a very big fan of your products. I actually have the Feel Good shirt in my drawer. I wore it yesterday, actually, and I thought of you both. So I love comfortable feeling shirts and just all clothing. I love having that comfortable feel. And, it just makes the day go better, too, when you're enjoying that. So I know that you started this to help with research, but where do you feel the need is in the blindness community to have that good feeling clothing and something that would be distinguishable to the blind? Can you talk about that, and what kind of research did you have to do, if any, to see what people would like or what would distinguish yourself from others on the market?
Well, the interesting thing is that although we started with that original mission, what we kind of naively didn't realize is that probably the biggest part of this whole project, beyond the softness of the clothing, beyond the donations, was the community. And it's probably the most significant point of impact for us. And that's taken many forms. One is that we work with a lot of suppliers and organizations, not from a donations perspective, but literally from a supply chain perspective. We've contracted with folks like Dallas Lighthouse for the Blind, now Envision, Industries for the Blind. We have some intellectual property licensing agreements with Southeastern Guide Dogs. We've done a campaign with Guide Dogs for the Blind. And as many of these organizations that have 3 letters that end in the word B as we possibly can. But from the clothing perspective, the one thing that we did is we decided, Bryan and I learned Braille as kids, and we thought, you know what, we don't want to put like a cheesy logo on the pocket of our shirts. Why don't we do something that's actually means something and functional? And so the way you know that somebody has a Two Blind Brothers shirt is by the Braille insignias. And so the most common thing we do now is we put the color of the shirt on the bottom right hem. And even though I have, some vision, I use it all the time to tell if I'm grabbing a navy or a black shirt. And that little indicator, means a lot. It's first of all, for someone who's not blind or visually impaired, it's a much cooler logo than pick your favorite animal. And it also means something. It teaches something. It touches on an issue, which is kind of a very relevant issue in the blind community, which is Braille literacy. And it's been a great way for us to kind of brand what we're doing.
Yes, absolutely. I was actually out yesterday with the Feel Good shirt on, and I was talking to somebody, and I said, "Oh, there's Braille on that," and they noticed that, and yeah, so it really sets you apart. I think that's great.
So primarily your shirts, that when you started out, was it basically, were they t-shirts? Were they polos? How were they? And then how did you branch out into all the other apparel that you offer now, and as well as the other stuff that you offer now?
Yeah, when we first started, we didn't really have a business plan for the business. We just kind of were just going to make shirts for ourselves. And Brad and I both really liked this Henley style shirt, kind of a t-shirt with a three button neck. And the reason we liked it is because in New York, people would view that as dressed up enough where you could go out to dinner and go have a nice time. You could put on, but you didn't need to get a whole button down on. You could be super comfortable, super cozy wearing the shirt. And it actually was funny because my girlfriend, now wife, at the time was in fashion. And so she came on and was just like, hey, this thing is a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory on most major retailers' websites. So maybe let's branch into actual basics. So what we started going out and branching into, crew necks and V-necks and really more those luxury elevated basic side of it. And then as we got bigger, we got more opportunities to branch out even more. And now we make probably the best pair of socks on the planet. Everything else you ever put on will feel like a foot prison. I guarantee you that personally. And we make these unbelievable tote bags, or the sunglasses we make are as nice as I think you possibly can. So we've really branched into just treating everything we make as this, beautiful, high quality, almost almost art level of design and thought goes into each thing, because if you're going to wear a Two Blind Brothers shirt and Brad and I's faces on the front of the brand, we want you to be more happy wearing that than anything else you've ever touched.
I noticed that with the socks when I was looking the other day, and I showed them to my wife today. That's one of our biggest things. My wife has sight. I have a little bit of sight, as you do. And I thought, what a great idea with the high contrast colors on the toe and the heel to then match them later on. That's one thing that I once did a study. I have congenital glaucoma, and I did a glaucoma study, and they said, okay, you've got to match these 5 pairs of socks with the ones that are on the wall, put them in front of the matching. And I had to go by feel, because they were black and blue and brown, and I they all look the same color to me. And so I'm going by feel, and I showed my wife today, and she's like, what are those? And I said, oh, these are the guys we're speaking to today. I said, what do you think? She said, oh, that's great. Look, you'd be able to tell the difference between, which goes with what and so forth. Is that something, the contrast, was that something that you thought of when you said, hey, let's do socks, let's do something like this?
Yeah, we always want to, Bryan and I had to learn all these terms, but one of the terms we had to learn were like brand guidelines and or brand guardrails, and high contrast is like kind of one of those brand guidelines. Anytime whether it's a website or a new product or, static digital ads or whatever it is, that's just that's sort of one of the principles around the creative that we include. And so for exactly that reason, I mean, contrast is a big deal for Bryan and I growing up. And so we try to use it in most of the products.
Okay. And as far as the sunglasses go, you mentioned those. So those you're obviously not manufacturing, or are you manufacturing them? Where are they? How do they fit into your line?
Well, so actually we contract with Industries for the Blind in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. So we order a lot of the components from some various places.
Okay.
They all go to IFB, and then they kind of put them together and provide it to us. So we actually have a team of blind and visually impaired workers there in Winston-Salem helping us do that.
Oh, that is very cool.
So one of the things that you mentioned is the community aspect, which I think is great, because not only are you a business, but you're showing the community that you really care about the community and the blind and sighted alike as well. I'm sure that it took a lot of marketing and publicity and word of mouth to get people to know that you were there and to be coming back and all that. What was it like for you in terms of the marketing and the publicity side of where you are today?
We've been on probably the greatest adventure 2 people could ever have. We launched our project in May of 2016, and 6 months later, we were on the Ellen DeGeneres show, walking out in front of 10 to 10 million people to tell our story and talk about vision impairment, and then 3 weeks later on NBC Nightly News with Lester Holt. And so we got thrust into a spotlight, and then it really forced us to get as smart about marketing, branding, storytelling, communication as fast as possible. And the big principle that we always strive to achieve is, the world is a very noisy place. We all have a lot of people trying to get our attention and garner our trust and gain our attention, each and every day. And so for our brand and for any brand, you have to be more interesting, more compelling, more emotionally connected to the people you're speaking to than anything else they've seen that week. So that's always our strategy when it comes to marketing or anything, is to just be more compelling than anything they've seen that week, and then follow that attention up by doing things to gain their trust, by doing things to be a great representative and to hold and value that attention as much as we can.
How did Ellen come about? Did you contact them? Did they contact you? I mean, I figure that once that happened, it kind of spread like wildfire. But how did that initial contact get established, and what was that like, just in terms of the reality that you were going to do that?
It was wild. I mean, as Bryan said, we had just started the project 6 months earlier, but we had, through some Facebook posts that started to get a lot of attention online, the local news here, Fox 5, wanted to do an interview on us. And this was a big deal for us. We had never been on television before. We had never thought about like publicizing, ourselves, especially around our vision impairment. And so, we didn't even know how we were going to express the brand and what we were trying to do. And, but that went really well. And that sort of snowballed into another big interview, on a big social media news platform. And then the Ellen producer saw that second news segment and contacted us. And we were really naive about how all the media stuff worked, and they just said they wanted to get to know us a little bit, have a little conversation, just learn more about our project, but they were really just setting up an audition for us, actually. And luckily, I thought they needed to hear about all the tiny logistics of everything we were doing. Bryan, I don't know if he had taken some like a shot of whiskey or something before, but he was a lot of fun on that on that Skype call, and I think he actually sealed the deal, because afterwards they said, we need to get you guys on.
That is funny. So you launched in May of 2016. Had you quit your jobs yet, or was this still going to be a side hustle? How did that all play out?
No, it's such a good question, and we get this a lot, especially when we're ever talking to business podcast, kind of whatever. The thing that I think is so interesting is this idea that you need to be Cortez and burn the ships behind you and mortgage your house and put your child tuition, fund up for to start a business. Just isn't as true as maybe it was previously. Brad and I did this on nights and weekends until we really got our footing. When once we were on Ellen and we were on NBC Nightly, we just said, who gets this kind of publicity this early? Who has a chance to do something that could be this impactful? And so only at that point did we actually quit our jobs. Funny side note, though, it's a pretty terrifying day when your Ellen DeGeneres segment airs on January 4th, and you have to go into the office that you have been not telling exactly the truth to about what you've been doing in your sick days on January 5th. That is that was an odd moment in conversation.
Sticking with the business, as far as that goes, how many folks now work with you, for you? I'm assuming you have do you have a warehouse in New York? How does that all work out?
Yeah, so we have, we just hired somebody actually this past week. So I think that brings the internal team to 5 plus Bryan and I. And then we have a lot of sort of outside of the Two Blind Brothers itself. We have a warehouse in New Jersey, and Denver, Colorado. We have production, some in LA, some in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, some overseas, and then various kind of marketing agencies and things like that.
Okay, so roughly 7 are in the business altogether.
Rachel, Elena, Angela, Ryan, Katie, and now Krista, and then Bryan and I. So 8, I guess.
Okay.
And we're a little bit of a hub and spoke model, right? That core team covers a lot of ground, but we contract to warehouses, we contract to some agencies. We just build the team around, to do core competency stuff.
Okay. So when you, I'm guessing you have the two warehouses, one covers the west, one covers the east. Is that how the model is set up, or do you?
For fulfillment. Yep.
I know that you mentioned the community, but you also mentioned that you have partnerships with the corporations, some big corporations. Can you touch on that? And I know that you have some plans that you're working on in the future. I don't know how much you can or want to divulge, but tell the listeners about that.
Yeah, there's a couple. They kind of break up into two things. They're either sort of like product or brand partnerships, or they're kind of like eye health related partnerships that are associated with the mission. One of the really fun things that we got to do on the brand side was we co-designed the uniforms for the French Paralympic soccer team with Puma. Very, very cool, being able to interact with them, having our designs represented on a national stage like that was really, really neat. I don't know why.
International stage, Brad.
International stage. I don't know why they didn't hire somebody from France to design the French uniforms, but I didn't ask the question why. But we really, really enjoyed that. And then there's, a lot we do with different folks, whether it's, through optometrist companies or organizations, ophthalmology, or sort of biotech looking at different therapies for retinal eye disease. Some of that is like events and speaking, and some of it is around awareness. But that's been really fun for us, because it's, we're doing a good job of bringing awareness and attention and community and giving some money to these causes, but we get to feel like we have, an influence, a touch point with some of the things that are cutting edge. And examples like Waymaps, which is a company trying to develop indoor mapping technology for the blind and visually impaired, and others. So that all of those have been a lot of fun.
If you were talking to some kids today, whether it's middle school or high school, and they said, "Hey, we think we want to go into business," what would you recommend to them?
Go into business for themselves,
if they want to start a business. Hey, I'm thinking about starting a business. What would you tell them?
I tell them, this might be a little outside of what most people say, is the same way that you go to college to get an education, or you go to a trade school to be a mechanic or a carpenter or whatever. Go to a big organization, kind of a GE, a Johnson and Johnson, a Oracle, or whatever, Goldman Sachs, whatever the biggest, baddest company you can go to, and get your 2-year kind of corporate education of how to be a professional in the working world, how to operate, how to speak the lingo, how to have the communication, how to go through that process, because it really is invaluable. It's invaluable to learn how to do that. And if you just come out and you go to a startup, there's just going to be little lessons that you probably could have easily overcome and learn. And while you're getting that corporate education, you can spend your nights and weekends on your passion. If your favorite thing in the world is making super comfy t-shirts, we don't need more competition. Brad and I have enough. We're fighting off enough people. All right. Pick just anything else. But you can do you can make your website, and you can start making content and putting it out there, and finding the niche population that cares a lot about the specific thing you care about. Is it camping? Is it hiking? Is it cooking? Is it aerospace engineering? Whatever your unique passion that is as finite as you can get it, start there, build it while you're getting your other education. And then when it's ready, you'll be ready to launch in a way that you never would have if you didn't take the time.
Talking about competition, has print on demand, has that explosion, has that put a dent in anything for you guys?
No, I think it was, that sort of thing was kind of, the reason it didn't really matter is there's already 100,000 apparel brands out there. The competition, if you were trying to put together a business plan, I would advise you against restaurants, t-shirts. There's probably a few others out there, but I think we were always committed to this regardless of its kind of financial impact. We knew it was going to be fun. We knew it was going to be helpful for the foundation fighting blindness. And we didn't really care that much about how big it got, as long as it got to that right size that was right for our community and customers. And so, and the thing is we have a pretty, one of the nice things is we have a pretty nuanced and narrow and direct brand story, about our own personal experience and what we're trying to do. I mean, there's plenty of organizations out there that are, trying to help other causes or even help the blind community. We celebrate those. I mean, it helps it helps the overall mission to bring more attention to the community and to, raise more money for other causes. So that hasn't been, actually, it's usually a good thing when we hear about other folks trying to make products for the blind or visually impaired.
Now that we've heard a lot about your story and about your product offerings, I know that there's going to be a lot of listeners in our community that are going to support you and be loyal customers. Can you give the website and any social media information for where people can find you and shop for your products?
Yeah, so www.2two blind BLIND brothers BROTHERS, very proud of myself for getting that last one spelled correctly, .com. So twoblindbrothers.com. Brad's direct cell phone number, and this goes straight to him, is just kidding. I won't do that. I always try and say this, that shopping Two Blind Brothers is amazing. It supports us. It's an incredible thing. You get an amazing product. You get something else, but just telling a friend about 2BB and just spreading the positivity, the empowerment, the awareness is so valuable as well. So even if you're not quite ready to buy something, just talking to a friend about a cool company you heard about is also just so critical for our success. And we appreciate everyone who does it.
Is there anything else that maybe we didn't ask that you'd like to tell us?
Oh, we really appreciate it. I mean, the only thing we want to say is thank you, because, this project it started with just Bryan and I talking, and the only reason it's gotten anywhere is friends willing to help us out with the business or the products, or frankly, lifting up the story, which you all are doing here. And when Bryan and I were kids, there weren't that many people that, we could easily access, or stories we could hear about people who had traveled these interesting journeys with vision issues. So, just grateful that places like this exist to lift those stories up.
Brad and Bryan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It was absolutely our pleasure.
Thanks again to Brad and Bryan for coming on and talking about their operation, Two Blind Brothers. And Simon, what a great story that is, from how they got started to where they are today.
Yes, absolutely. I really enjoyed hearing about their story and just hearing their passion. They are really role models for all of us in the blindness community to keep aspiring and keep challenging ourselves and never limit the possibilities. And as I said, their parents really helped them to be inspired and to have no limits to their possibilities. And I really think that their message is great. Their inspiration is great. And a lot of people today, I've been hearing people feeling kind of discouraged about starting businesses, or feeling discouraged about just things in our world. And their story is a real excellent reminder that the American dream is still attainable. If you're willing to work for it, you can do anything in your life. And that was just my takeaway from this wonderful interview.
Yeah, and I think it was a good point, what they said as far as how to go about starting your business, whether you want to do something, well, as they said, anything other than restaurants or t-shirts. but what you can do, and that it is something that you can achieve if you start off somewhere. Once you're take the right classes in school, then go and get a job with one of those big companies that they mentioned, and then start on your side hustle with the goal of making that a full-time job, a full-time business once you get some traction. And again, for folks who are basically your age, Simon, who are in college and who are thinking, hey, I'd like to start a business, what a great interview this was to get those folks inspired.
Absolutely. I like that advice about going in the corporate world and working in that environment. And that's something I will definitely take to heart in my journey as well.
Simon, thanks for sitting in today. It was a pleasure to have you on. And thanks everyone out there for listening.
It's always a pleasure to work with you, David. And all listeners out there, have a wonderful day.